So welcome everyone to Three Questions, where I offer my guest five questions and ask them to choose three. And then we talk about stuff. And somewhere along the line, I try to mention my new book.
I love that.
Today, I am joyfully joined with Towanda Harris, who is a teacher, a professor, a consultant, an author, an educator, a warrior. She is the author of The Right Tools, which is honestly a book. I was thinking about it today, Towanda. I cannot think of a book that's more needed right now in schools in terms of all the choices that districts are needing to make about resources and curriculum and what the best fit is for their kids. And I was just really struck again by just how unbelievably timely and current The Right Tools is. So anyone who's listening, who's either making those decisions or living under the effects of those decisions, it's definitely a great book to pick up. I'm so glad you're here with
Thank
me.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
So you have chosen three questions from the five questions. And the first question you chose, which I'm very excited about, is what is your origin story as an educator? And then there's a part two of the question, which is how do you characterize like your current work? Like what are you currently passionate about? But how did you
Yeah.
start?
So I always tell folks I have such a boring education story, like a teacher story. Like I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to, ever since I was younger, I was the person that took my, stuffed animals, lined them up. I'm going to teach these stuffed animals. And then my mom worked for the school department. And when schools were closing and, they were merging schools together, they would take the furniture and just kind of toss it out or sell it or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And instead of it going in the garbage, my mom would allow me to go and kind of look like such an odd thing. And I was so excited, right?
Yeah.
That should have
Those
been
like
the
Winter
indicator.
Bandit desks and stuff like that.
So my basement was set up like a classroom, right? And so when my cousins came over, clearly I was going to be the teacher and you were going to be the student. I am the only one that could be the teacher. I was pretty bossy, can't you tell? So I remember having.
Are you the eldest daughter?
No, I'm the
Oh,
youngest. I'm like
surprising.
spoiled brat. Yeah, that's me.
Oh,
That's
you're the
me.
only?
No, I'm the youngest of eight.
Whoa, the youngest of eight.
Youngest
Trying
of
to get us
eight.
off track here. That's amazing. Okay.
Yes,
The baby, and
yes.
you're like, I'm in charge. I get it. All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. Isn't that how the youngest, we kind of take over?
Absolutely.
So I remember having things like carbon copies. So I'm going to date myself. Remember, like the
100%.
carbon sheets,
I
and you
could
had to like
smell
take them
those.
out of
Yeah.
and sit them on top of the copy and then write it. And that was it. Like, that's what I did. It would bring me so much joy. And I would grade my cousin's pre-made test. I made the assessment and I'm grading them with my red pen and, all of those things. And I started to model some of the cool things that I thought, educators are my favorite teachers, kind of showed me. And, years passed and I said, I really like it. I connected with students. I connected with children a lot, whether it be at Sunday school, whether it be at camps. Children were just kind of drawn to me and I had a really great time with them. And I attended Clark Atlanta University and I went into the School of Education. And I just really started to find my groove. Clark Atlanta, for those that don't know, is a historically Black college or university, and it is nestled in Atlanta. We are considered the AU Center, Atlanta University Center. We are literally right next to it. It's like a stone throw away of Spelman College, Morehouse, and Morris Brown. All of our campuses are connected, and we're known as the Atlanta University Center. And when I attended Clark Atlanta, I started to kind of find my voice. Find what it is that I wanted to do. Yes, you want to be a teacher, but you don't necessarily know kind of where you want to land, math, literacy, if you want to be in elementary, middle school, where you want to be. And so, of course, you have your practicum hours where you're going into the field and you're doing your volunteer hours. And I found that I just really took to the ages third through fifth. I mean, the grades third through fifth. And I
Great.
loved it. I really, really loved it. Funny story, I did summer school one year with first graders. Hats off. Oh my goodness. You have a special place in heaven. My first grade and my kindergarten teachers, you were built for this. I thought I was built for that life. I did summer school and it was probably about 2 weeks in, and the students kept crying. I was teaching them about money. And I'm like, I had this wonderful, cute song, a nickel's 5 cents, a dime's 10 cents. And one student couldn't remember it. And he just kept crying. And I said, why are you crying? Why are you crying? And they were just so emotional. And I realized that for me, that just wasn't my calling. I tried to love on them as much as I could, but that was just summer school. And I said, please, during the school year, I'm not built for this life. So hats off.
Yeah.
But I tended to draw towards the older upper elementary students. And, I loved it. I ended up teaching for about 5 years. And after 5 years, an opportunity presented itself to our school, our district at the time. It was a grant opportunity. And I guess previously our district had tried to apply, they didn't get it. So they chose 21 schools in our district to apply for this grant. And I had the opportunity to be a lead writer or like a liaison to write this particular grant. So it gave me some grant writing experience, which was really great. We got the grant. It was for over $500,000.
Wow.
$500,000 just for 3 years, and it included a literacy coach.
Yeah.
Now, I thought what was most interesting with this grant, you had to have a core reading program.
Mhm.
And you would have 90 minutes of your day that you would go ahead and teach reading, but an additional 30 minutes would be for like small group. It would be for intervention, whatever it is that you wanted to do, because it was a scripted program.
Mhm.
We'll go somewhere with that. So it was this scripted program, right? And so we get to the scripted program, and then the 30 minutes that was before, you got to see the student strengths. You got to see, them come alive. And then you had to transition into this very rigid, this is what we're going to do. It was so disconnected. It was so disconnected. And so we started to see growth in one area of a student's reading life and not in all areas of a student's reading life. Now, I didn't have the words to kind of attached to that. Those were just my observations. And so eventually I ended up just years later working at the district level in the area of literacy, and then I worked for the associate superintendent. And so from that, it was a pretty unique opportunity for me to see education through different lenses. So I saw it as a classroom teacher. I'm this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, which is why I wrote my book. I was just like, I wish someone would have told me I had permission to do this. Like, I didn't need a program to see the humanity in my students. And there was no one there telling me that. All of my professional development was around the program. That was it. That was it. So, eventually, I was able to see through the lens of my classroom. Then I was able to see it from the lens of an instructional coach. And then working at the district level, working with instructional coaches across the district. And then eventually working for the associate superintendent, I worked with principals in their leadership teams. So all of those factors just came together to, I guess, empower me even more to do the work that I'm doing now,
Yeah.
because I see the gaps
Yep.
that
Yep.
exist, and the things that we are able to kind of sweep under the rug
Yeah.
and pretend as though they're connected, and in actuality, they're not connected,
Yeah.
because, you know,
Dude, Well, and what I love is that like you have that bird's eye view perspective. Do you know what I mean? Of like working with all those different positions and roles. So you can really see those gaps. I find that sometimes I don't work as closely with district or administration, but I do often now. I'm always so struck by how much you can see when you're not just in your own role. Do you know what I mean? But that you're able to like sort of see how the whole system is working together. That's really
Yeah.
beautiful. The other thing I
Yeah.
noticed just is I've asked a couple people this question of the origin story, or a couple people have chosen this origin story question. And every person who talks about it talks about how they felt connected to kids. Do you know what I mean? As part of their
Yeah.
origin, that part of the origin was, just realizing that they had an aptitude or an enjoyment or a real like passion for connecting
Yeah.
to kids. It's so cool.
I think
I
that
also,
that's what grounds you,
yeah,
like
yeah,
honestly, because education, I mean, being an educator is hard. I tell folks it's hard work, but it is heart work.
yeah,
And heart work requires this emotional lift from you that you are sometimes kind of giving so much that you are just depleted. And I won't chase this rabbit. I'm good at chasing rabbits, but I won't kind of go into how as educators we really need to pull back and replenish ourselves. Just find our place of just rejuvenation, our place of just our self care,
Mhm.
because we're giving. This is a profession in which, if you are in it for the right reasons, you are giving your all.
All the time.
And for those that have left education, unfortunately, just because of circumstances and all of that, I am not in any way in the place of judgment or in the seat of judgment for those that left. It is exhausting. It is very exhausting because it's kind of like you want so much for your students, and there are these invisible barriers that are placed in front of you, that you are fighting the barriers and you are fighting for your students to
Exactly.
get what they need. And so you are exhausted. You are absolutely exhausted, and you know what they need, but sometimes you're doing it with one hand
Yeah.
behind your back, trying to still teach and do this work.
Because like even if all the circumstances were amazing and you could do everything you thought was right and you had all the resources you wanted, still teaching is exhausting. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's what I feel like people
Absolutely.
don't totally understand if they don't know it, right? Or people forget sometimes if they leave the classroom, is just teaching morning to afternoon every day, 5 days a week, all your kids with
Yes.
all their needs and all their stuff in the best circumstances is one of the most draining jobs that I have ever done. And I've done a lot of jobs in my life. And like, my goodness, classroom teaching is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's just the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mhm.
And then you add in what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Having to do that and not be able to do what you know is right for your kids, or have obstacles
Mhm.
in the way, or have inequities in the way and systematic oppression in the
Yes.
way to keep you from doing what you know you need to do. Oh, it's hard.
Absolutely.
That is hard. Yeah. I love that. So how would you characterize your work right now? What are you most on about in your work?
Hmm.
Ooh.
So, I think before the pandemic,
Mhm.
I was focused heavily on, kind of looking at curriculum and adjusting the curriculum to meet the goals that you have set. And it primarily kind of focused around, centered around the academic goals that you had for your classroom or that the school gave you, or whatever the case may be. The pandemic taught me a lot about myself, how I am, what environment I am best in, how I am set up for success in certain spaces. And because of that, I've rethought some of the things that I kind of pushed, or some of the work I was doing before the pandemic. Um, we've talked about this before, but when the pandemic hit, it was a collective. trauma
Yep.
that we all experienced, and we were holding on for dear life. I mean, the things that we thought were important were no longer important. We were just trying to find joy in
Any joy.
anything.
Any
It
joy.
didn't matter. We were like, I mean, people tried to skate in their house. Like, I'm going to learn to skate. I remember I have countless videos. I have three children, a 21-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 15-year-old. Well, they were, much younger at the time. I have countless videos of us doing just the oddest things. And my husband is like taping it or either doing something to be a part of this. And there's this one video we decided to figure out if we could climb down the stairs on our hands, like wheelbarrow style. I don't know. I mean, you were like doing random things like, all right, today,
Okay.
this is what we're going to do.
Cause joy today.
Let's
Yeah, I
try
get
it.
it. Yeah.
And I literally, I mean, I have a
Were you
video
able to
of
do
my
it?
son. Yeah, it will probably halfway down. And then we are a very tall family. I mean, my middle child is 6'5". Oh, excuse me. Yes,
Oh,
he's 6'5". My
wow.
husband's 6'6". My son is 6'2". Like we are a pretty
Yep.
giant
Yep.
family, right? And so we were just doing random things. But, during that time, we were literally trying to find moments of laughter, moments of joy, getting on Zoom, trying to have conversations. Those that weren't family members that weren't technology savvy, we were trying to tell them over Zoom or over the phone, okay, click this, turn your phone this way, don't look at the sky with the camera, all of these things. But, that was where we were. And so we came out of, this pandemic. Now we're post pandemic, and we are trying to recover, recover from the trauma that we experienced collectively. It wasn't about, race. It wasn't about cultures. Like, we collectively experienced. Now, don't get me wrong, there were certain groups that experienced it much more than others, but it was a common experience nonetheless. And so coming out of that, I've really thought more about, this idea of creating spaces in which all students feel seen, they feel valued, and they feel heard, not just for their academic growth, but their growth as a human being, right? And so I feel as though before the pandemic, we were able to compartmentalize academics.
Yeah.
We were able to say, math, do well here, you check the box and you could go here. Literacy, check the box and go here. Like, you were able to, not to say that it was right, but we were able to hide that and mask that as success.
Yeah.
And now we are struggling with that masking. Students are like, no, I'm not okay. I'm bucking the system. That's it. I don't want to do this.
That's it. That idea, that word masking is so huge, because like I'm learning a lot with like neurodiversity in my family and even in myself that I'm recognizing, right? And recognizing that word is such a powerful one that people with neurodiversity, right, often have to mask to pretend to be a certain way to fit in society. Yeah. And to your point, I think we were masking a whole bunch of things. You were like, we knew it wasn't right. You said that about the like compartmentalization. We knew it wasn't right, but it was like, it's all right. We're okay. We're functioning. It's all rolling along. And then the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden it's like people can't mask in the same way anymore. Kids can't. They're like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's so much of that resistance in classrooms now of students. And I kind of like, I know it's a problem and I know we have to like work with it, but also there's a part of me that really respects the rebellion of young people. You know what I mean? The way that like, I mean, I don't want to be the classroom teacher all the time.
I know.
You can definitely listen to me, but I get it, right? There's a way that they're like, no, if you can't show me how this is relevant to me, if you can't show me about how this connects to me as like a human being, I'm not here for it.
Absolutely.
And I think about, I can plug my book, because I think about In the Heart of Fiction, that's coming out any day now, although we have no idea what's happening. I do a lot of work of trying to connect these strategies, right, that are so academic, are so about skills and like improving our analysis of books. But for every lesson that I introduce, I do a little essay work of how does this connect to our lives, our hearts, our humanity, our
Yeah.
collective
Mm-hmm.
personhood. And
Yeah.
there's something about that I always loved about reading and writing workshop, right? It's just the amount
Yeah.
of space you have for being a human being.
Yeah. I think that I'm so excited for your book to come out, number one. Because when you think about this idea of writing and connecting it back to you as a human being, it goes sometimes undervalued in the classroom because you can't always tie it to a test score.
That's right.
And the problem with that is when we write, sometimes it is a source of healing,
Yeah.
right? It is a source of reflection. And it allows us to kind of, in our writing, build empathy, compassion, like all of those things as a human being that makes you a good human being, a decent human being. Um, it comes out in your writing.
That's right.
And when you're not allowed to do that in a space in which maybe you may be experiencing some trauma, or you might be just having a moment, having and just going through something, and you cannot release it in any way, and you're told, no, this lesson is important, you're going to learn this right now. You're not giving students an outlet,
That's right.
to do this work. And so I appreciate it, and I can't wait for teachers to get though your book in their hands to say, no, we can do this and that.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
can focus on writing, but why not connect it to students, the humanity of the students, because we're all dealing with some stuff.
We are.
Like
And
we're
yeah,
all
we all are.
going through some
That's right.
stuff.
Well, in schools, I was just talking to someone else, like schools are just buildings full of children. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes I feel like we just really forget that sometimes. I mean, teachers don't,
Yeah.
educators don't,
Agree.
right? But the people making decisions, the people making tests, the people doing all that, it's like these are children. Even high school students are big, big, big children, right? And
Yeah.
we're all just trying to live our lives, and it's like a huge chunk of these kids' day. And the more that we can connect to our hearts, right, it's heart work. It's also the
Yeah.
other direction though, right? I know I've learned this from you too, that like the work we do as readers, the work we do as writers is also the work that makes us more interesting, introspective,
Yes.
evolving, healing. Do you know what I mean? It helps us, like I can think about character motivation in a book I'm reading, but to then also turn that around and be like, well, what motivates me?
Mm. Yes, that's
Right?
good.
What am I driven
Mhm.
by? Is that what I want to be driven by? Right? And to have that
Mhm.
critical eye on it, or what themes are in my life that keep coming up? I'm a long-term proponent of therapy. And I'm not suggesting that our classrooms should be therapy classrooms or that we're therapists by any means. At the same
Mhm.
time, right? The work we do as readers is a kind of therapy because it's
I agree.
connection to humanity
Mhm.
and to human
I
beings.
agree.
I love
Mhm.
that. All right. So your second question you chose, Tawanda, was number 3, which is what is your favorite and least favorite word right now in education?
So I will say rigor.
Yes. I'm saying least, I'm assuming least favorite.
Yeah. So
Okay, good. If you said favorite, I all of a
it's
sudden would have been like, oh no, Tawanda's
so
on a different
it's
page.
like rigor is okay. Let me back up.
Good.
So rigor misused
Yeah.
so often. Well, I think I have two. Fidelity, done with
Woo.
fidelity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have like those are like curse words, but anyway. So when I
Fidelity to
say
rigor.
rigor,
Fidelity to rigor really would get you
right,
done. Yeah.
and I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like let's unpack that. And I think oftentimes, like with this word rigor, I don't necessarily think that the word itself is bad. I do believe that how it has been used has been extremely harmful for students. And the reason I don't say I am cautious about saying that the word is bad because I think about Zaretta Hammond's Ready for Rigor framework. I absolutely love her Ready for Rigor framework. And that is the framework that I use to support a school um, that I had been working with for a couple of years. And in her Ready for Rigor framework, she has four different components to this. It's not a line definition. It is they're actionable things.
That's it.
And the first component is that reflection.
Oh, wow.
What
Nice.
what do I believe about education? What do I believe about students? What do I believe about myself? Like all of those things. We have to hash that out before we even engage in working with students because it influences heavily the questions that we ask,
Mm-hmm.
the decisions that we make,
Mm-hmm.
the expectations that we have, the space that we create for students to have agency, like all of those things are influenced by what we believe about them, right? And so in her framework, she talks about this idea of learning partnership. And Dr. Goldie Muhammad talks about this as well, that learning is a two-way direction. You know, it's a train. It's two way. It's not me being the giver of all knowledge. It is me sharing new learning with you and you sharing new learning with me. If I walk away from a space and I don't know anything more about the topic that I just talked about or any more about my students, then I just gave you information.
That's right. That's
And it happens so often, you know, and I'll say, you know, as a teacher, I had a scope and sequence
Yep.
that I had to get through. You know, I was in a testing grade for the state, so there was a lot of pressure to get through this curriculum and all of those things, and me not understanding how it could be harmful. I wanted to do the right thing that I thought I was supposed to do according to my administrators. And I'm not saying to the teachers out here that are watching, I'm not asking you to go out and take your scope and sequence, rip it up and throw it in the air. Like we're not starting a
Let's do
movement.
it, Juana. Let's do the revolution now. It starts today.
Hi, scope and sequence movement. We're not doing that. However, we have to be aware that we are teaching, as Ariel Johnson says, tiny humans. You know, we are teaching tiny humans, and we have to make sure that they are the driver of how fast or slow, how deep or, you know, surface we do have conversations about certain topics. I remember, so I teach at Clark Atlanta.
Mhm.
And it's a special place because I graduated from
I was
there.
going to say, it's
And I
amazing that you teach
know,
at your
yeah,
alma mater. That's really beautiful. What a
it's
homecoming. Yeah.
wonderful. Yes, it's
Cool.
wonderful. And I remember talking with my students. We were talking about To Kill a Mockingbird. We were talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, and I said, you know, some of the things in there, and you know, we're talking about how some of the pieces could be extremely harmful for underrepresented groups, marginalized communities, like all of those things. And there was a student that sat in the back, and he was in tears. And he said he had a traumatizing experience when he was in the classroom because the teacher said, let's turn this into a play, and had him play
No, 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 no,
Black character and said, I think you'll be the perfect character for this. You know, I think you'll be the perfect person for this. And he had to read the lines and he's in tears. And what was crazy, he didn't realize how hurt he was until that moment in my
no.
class.
You spoke it. That's right.
And
Because
I'm
we
like,
teach
that,
kids just to take it. Do you know what I mean? We
yep,
teach kids to just take it. And then if
absolutely.
the teacher did it, it has to be right. Right? How
Yep,
beautiful, how horrible and beautiful that you were able to speak that.
yeah.
Because we can't
And, you know,
heal from what we don't name. We can't heal from what we don't
absolutely.
name, right? So if I don't know that
Absolutely.
something has hurt me, I just keep moving forward with that hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you being able
Mm-hmm.
to speak it allows someone to be like, wait, that wasn't right. How
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, the thing about rigor too is that it's like you're saying, like I feel like the definition of rigor that everyone loves in the sort of leadership of education in the country or whatever is that everything's just difficult and fast and crammed. Do you know what I mean? Like that's rigorous. Rigor is the text is hard, the skill is hard, the lessons go by fast, the task is difficult. We're just moving, moving, moving. But like Maggie and I did a lot of talking and research around rigor and being like, there's another definition of it that actually has real meaning, right? To Hammond's definition, Muhammad's definition. It's just like being able to work hard at something and to be smart about when and what to work hard on, prioritizing
Mhm.
well of when to roll up your
Yes.
sleeves, right? It's just not true in any profession that you're supposed to be rigorous all the time. There are
Mhm.
days I
Mhm.
work my you know what off, and then there are
Mhm.
days I work. I do my job
Absolutely.
totally
Absolutely.
adequately. Do you know what I mean? But I wouldn't call it a rigorous day. And I think that's true for
Mhm.
almost anyone I work with, other than maybe like surgeons, stuff like that. I hope they're really rigorous all the time.
Like, I want you to have every day filled
Please,
with rigor. Every day.
every day, every day. Right? So I think that's so true that we really have taken that word and squeezed out all the good meaning out of it. Right?
Mhm.
Beautiful. All right,
Yeah.
what's your favorite word?
Oh, goodness.
I get to ask these questions. I don't even have my own answers. So that's what I get to do. I don't have to put myself on the spot.
Joy.
Yeah.
Joy. I mean, I just joy. I think that right now we are in an interesting space in education where we have, as educators, so much we want to share with students. However, there's this invisible brick wall that tends to kind of be in between us
Mhm.
and them, where they're trying to kind of work through their own understanding of where they are in the world, where they are in life, and their motivation to see the value
Yeah.
in what we want them to learn, and what we want them to experience. And they're also fighting back some trauma that they've experienced from some other teachers that may have not had their best interest at heart, or may have kind of put them in a box, or not allowed them to fully share or arrive in that space as their full self, where they've had to kind of quiet some of those
Mhm.
places. And we know as adults how frustrating that is. I was having this conversation with someone a couple of days ago. I said, as an adult, I know my frustration that I have walking to a space into a space in which I don't feel
Yep.
seen, I don't feel valued, I don't feel heard. And I just kind of withdraw.
Yeah.
So when I get quiet, I love to talk. That's what I do. When I get quiet, just know that I just don't feel as though my word is, or my work is valued, or that you hear me. So what is the point? And our students have those same feelings. However, they can't just walk away. We have the great fortune to say, oh, you know what? I'll just leave this space. I could drive away, or I could get another job. All of that. Students can't. They can't choose which teachers they have. They can't choose which schools they go to. They can't choose which books they read. Like, all of those things are not a choice. And I think that when we don't allow them to kind of weigh in on what they're feeling and how they're feeling, it takes away, it robs them of the joy that they could experience with being in community
Yeah.
with their classmates, with their school, with their teachers, and all of that. So yeah, that's my
Joy is
favorite
it,
word.
man. Because joy is it, right? It's like, I mean, I feel like also Lorena Herman was talking about how joy has been weaponized too, right? That like we take this idea that's so true. Same with rigor, right? These words that become words in education. We take joy and then we make it like a standard that you should be living up to, and we put pressure on teachers. Do you know what I mean? We say somehow it's the teacher's fault if their classrooms aren't joyful classrooms. They might have a responsibility, there might be a process to go through to make our classrooms more joyful. I think so much of the stuff that gets in the way of joy is the systemic stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're yoked to these standardized tests, or the fact that we have curriculum that we have to live with fidelity to, even if it doesn't match the students in front of us or spark joy in them or whatever, right?
Mhm.
It's like, if I don't have that agency, I can't find the joy,
Yeah.
because I'm doing
And,
your version of joy, and your version of joy is so personal, right? I can't do your
it
version
is.
of joy. I have to create my version of joy in my teaching.
Absolutely. And I think it's this idea that you have to choose joy or, student achievement,
Yeah.
like
Which is,
to increase student achievement. I'm like, no, it all goes together, just like social emotional learning. I used to, have to keep my face together when I would walk into a school and they would say, "Oh yeah, our social emotional learning block is from 8 to 8:30." Okay, so I don't know about you, but I can't regulate my emotions to 8 to 8:30.
I
Like
can't
I
feel it
can't
that
do
way.
that.
That's not when I'm feeling my feelings. Yeah, no, I'm too tired to feel
That's
my
right.
feelings
You
then.
know, you can't do that. And I would think that you would see that these strategies or whatever it is, that these tools that you're equipping students with on how to regulate emotions and how to just navigate in the world should carry out in math and social studies and literacy. Like it should
Yeah.
be how I read books,
Yeah.
how I engage in conversations. Like it should be everywhere, because empathy,
Yeah.
compassion, all of these things should be birthed out of me understanding myself, what I like, how I like to engage, and now I'm going to engage with others that way. It causes for a healthier space
Yeah.
overall. I worked with a school. The school was the one of the lowest performing schools in the entire district. And the first year I worked with this school, I only looked at school culture. That was it.
That's it.
In 1 year, that school performed in the top 5% of the entire district. The only thing I talked about was school culture.
Isn't that amazing?
I said,
And we know
what we believe about students determines what decisions we make and what experiences we think they deserve.
that's it.
Like, that's it.
Yep. That's it. It has to start with the grown-ups. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that in School Week, we think about social emotional learning or any of these things, and it's like we want the kids to do it, right? But it's like, if I'm doing social emotional learning, the first thing that happens is that the adults have to engage in social emotional learning, right? How, like, dealing with your emotions isn't just tamping them down and being sarcastic. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's actually feeling them and going through a process and all of that. And so the idea of like looking at culture first, or our relationships with each other first, or our community first, that's so brilliant. I worked there was a teacher I worked with who had a colleague down the hall. She really believed in a lot of things that we're talking about. This was in the Bronx, and her classroom was so joyful and so beautiful and so much choice and so much personal writing. And the kids were just so engaged, and it was such a beautiful place to be. And her colleague down the hall did test prep, drill, and grill all day long. This is actually a counterbalance story to yours, right? Because I'm so glad it worked for the data, right? For that building in your care, in your hands. In this case, it was the inverse though, right? He got great test scores.
Yep. Yep. I've seen that.
And she got real hammered for all, I could
Mm-hmm.
cry right now thinking about it, right? For all these
Yeah.
things that were so good for
Mm-hmm.
kids, so good for this community, but it didn't translate into a multiple choice question. And so
Mm-hmm.
she was
Yes.
asked to stop, right? And got test
Heartbreaking.
workbooks and all that. It's a
And
real
what does that do for the
question.
teacher?
What does that
Like,
do?
what does that do for the teacher? That's like, this is important. Like it, and then you wonder why that teacher says, I have to find another profession.
That's
Like
right.
I have to go to another school. And
There's no
so
joy.
now that school has lost a beautiful,
Beautiful.
wonderful teacher.
And there's a balance. I
because
mean, I like academics. I still focus on curriculum and academics a lot. Like I like pushing kids to work hard. I'm all about it.
yeah.
I'm not very nice to
Hmm.
students all the time, like let's get to work. Like I think we let kids get away with murder sometimes, in our classes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the
But I
balance.
think it's this balance. It's definitely this balance. So, when I work with schools and when I talk about curriculum and making adjustments to curriculum, you have your goal for the lesson, you have your goal for the unit, and we have to be reflective on these opportunities, learning opportunities to get there. Are they allowing students to have agency? Are they allowing students to think critically? Are they allowing students to make personal connections? Because sometimes it was only focused on the curriculum and the content, and it never kind of creates space that
Yep.
I have to sit with that new learning.
Yep.
And so it has to, you have to be intentional.
Yep. That's
And
it.
oftentimes, when teachers are asked to do a curriculum, they're like, okay, do this lesson as is.
Mm-hmm.
Nope, let's take the lesson
Mm-hmm.
and let's vet it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's look through the lens of what our students need. I mean, that's responsive teaching, right?
Right.
It's not nothing new.
Well, that's what feels so weird right now about this time. And then we'll move on to the last question because I want to respect your time. We've talked for a little longer than we intended. I can't help it. I'm sorry. But it's this idea of this new curriculum where it's like all of a sudden we're going to come up with a new basal reader that answers all the questions for the kids. And it's so strange because any teacher worth their salt knows that any curriculum is just a starting point. Any curriculum is going to have too much in it to teach. It's going to not match your kids. It's not going to have the right text necessarily, right, to get your kids passionate and joyful and all that kind of stuff. And so there's always work to do to tweak, which is to your point of your least favorite word being fidelity, right? Like we can't fidelity to, yeah. There's only a few things I want to have fidelity towards in this lifetime, and a curriculum is not one of them,
It's
right?
not one. Yes,
All right, last question. Do you have 5? Do you have a couple minutes for one more question?
I do. I do.
The last question you chose was, what is a motto you would use for teaching in our current circumstances?
Teaching is not an individual sport.
Oh, I love that. I'll write that down.
And in my book, there is a page that I dedicated to just the different roles that exist in a school building. And if I am honest with myself, when I think about me being in the school building, typically only the general ed teacher would make their way to the grade level team meeting. That was it. And there's so much more, so many more voices that need to make their way into that space so that we could be all that we could be for our students. And so really leaning in on the special education teacher and valuing the strategies that they're bringing to the space and not saying, oh, when they go to you, that's your problem, or that's I'll send them to you when they need it. Or thinking of the ELL teacher that exists in the building, or the gifted teacher. We had so many roles in our building, but we really didn't talk to each other.
No.
And so I probably took on more hats than I should have versus let me talk to the expert. Like, this is what you do, right? So give me some strategies and let's kind of reflect and see how it's working in my space. It might be going very well in your space. Let's try it in my space in the classroom. And so again, we sometimes work in silos, but it is to the detriment of our students, being the best that they can be.
Yep, it really is. And I think that's so much to do with like our country, right? And like how we have these attitudes that are born from whiteness and all sorts of places of like, do your own thing, be your own person, right? Solve the
Mm-hmm.
problem yourself, self-reliance. And I was saying to someone earlier that I have that in spades. And I'm trying this year, especially, to unlearn a lot of that because I tend to be a very like, I'll just take it on myself and I'll march for the hills and, make myself sick and work too hard and all that. And then also shut people out and not get smarter from the people that are around me. And it's my goal. So I might take your motto on a little bit this year Teaching is
Yes.
not an individual sport. We can't do it
Yeah.
alone.
We can't. And I'm learning that. I'm continuously just trying to lean in on my colleagues and being very mindful on who I surround myself with. And I really don't have time to surround myself with those that are doing the opposite of what I know is most important in students' lives. And it's like, okay, well, if it's working for you, go over here, and I'll go over there. And if we have a conversation, then I'll share, my heart as to why I do the things that I do. And I'm not saying that, I'll never engage with you, but I have to just be honest with my capacity
Yep.
to do this work. This work is hard.
This work
It
is
is it is challenging,
hard.
and I choose to use that energy working towards that work versus trying to convince you to
That's,
join me in this work.
that's it. I love that. Attraction rather than promotion, right? If you look at
Yeah.
me and you like my work and you like what I'm able to do, cool. But I'm not going to push it necessarily. I love that. Tawanda, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you. It was great to see you. I respect your work so much, and I'm so, so, so glad that you're in the world and in my world. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Yay.
And thank you for having me. I cannot wait. I cannot wait to have your book in my hands and to just kind of share it with just educators because, again, your work is much needed in this education world.
Right back at you. All right. Onward. Bye.